The trail stretched endlessly beneath the burning sun, an amber ribbon of dust winding through a silence so heavy it felt alive. The prairie grasses had turned to straw in the heat, and even the cicadas had grown weary of their own song. A wagon creaked to a stop in the middle of nowhere. The woman holding the reins, Agnes, was not the kind of person who looked back. Her gloved hands tightened, and the horse stamped impatiently. In the back of the wagon sat a girl no older than 8, her knees drawn to her chest, her small hands clutching a cloth bag that once held her father's tools. "Get down," Agnes said, her voice flat, as if she were asking someone to fetch a bucket of water. Clara May blinked up at her. "We're not home yet," she whispered. Agnes didn't answer. She stepped down, the hem of her gray skirt catching the dust, and walked to the back. The sunlight glared against her face, bleaching the kindness out of it. "This is as far as you go," she said. Clara looked around. The trail curved into the horizon, swallowed by heat haze. There was no house, no town, no one. "Mama," she started, but the word broke apart before it could leave her lips. "Don't call me that." Agnes's voice was sharp now. "Your father's gone. You're not my burden anymore." She tossed the cloth bag onto the ground. Inside, something clinked. Clara's father's pocket watch, maybe, the one that no longer ticked. Clara stepped down slowly, her shoes sinking into the sand. The ground burned through the thin soles. She looked up, hoping for a flicker of mercy, but Agnes was already climbing back onto the seat. "Wait," Clara said, running forward. "Please don't leave me here." But the whip cracked. The horse lurched, the wagon groaned, and the woman never looked back. Dust swallowed her whole. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, pressing against Clara's chest. She watched the trail until the last echo of wheels faded, then turned in a slow circle. Nothing but sky and land. The wind was the only thing that answered her. She sank to her knees beside her bag. The pocket watch had cracked open. The hands were stuck at 12. She held it against her heart. "Papa," she whispered. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried. The day moved like a dream she couldn't wake from. She walked because standing still felt like giving up. The sun crawled lower, painting the horizon in bruised colors. Her lips cracked. Her throat burned. She tried to remember which way the wagon had come, but every direction looked the same. When night fell, it wasn't dark. It was silver. The moon rose, spilling pale light across the land. The wind grew colder. Clara wrapped her arms around herself and sat against a rock. Her eyes fluttered, heavy with exhaustion and fear. She thought she saw movement far away. A flicker of fire, maybe a lantern, but she was too tired to stand. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was the distant echo of hooves. The sound of hooves broke through the quiet night, slow, measured, and sure. A single rider moved along the trail, the moonlight glinting off the silver buckle of his saddle. His name was Elias Boone, and he was a man who'd forgotten what it meant to have a home that wasn't filled with ghosts. He had left town before sunset, searching for a missing calf. But as he rode across the empty plains, a chill had crept up his spine, an instinct that something else was lost out here, something smaller, something human. His horse snorted, pausing mid-step. That's when he saw it. A small shape curled near the rocks, half covered by dust and shadow. Elias dismounted quietly. The air smelled of dry sage and sorrow. He knelt, brushing his hand against the shape. A child. Her face was pale, her lips cracked, a streak of dirt across one cheek like a scar from the world itself. "Hey now," he said softly, his voice rough from years of silence. "You're all right, little one. You're safe now." Clara stirred, her lashes fluttering open. The world swam before her eyes, moonlight, dust, a man with kind but weathered features. His hat shadowed his face, But his eyes, gray, steady, met hers with something she hadn't seen in days. Concern. "Are you real?" she whispered. He gave a faint smile. "Realer than most ghosts out here." Her throat tried to form words, but only a rasp came out. Elias pulled a canteen from his saddlebag and held it to her lips. She drank, trembling. "What are you doing here?" he asked gently. She looked toward the horizon, where the trail vanished. "She left me," she said. "The wagon. She said it was the end of the road." Elias's jaw tightened. He didn't need to ask who she was. The tone in the child's voice told him enough. He'd heard stories like this before, children left behind when love ran out or money got tight. But this, leaving a child on a trail alone? That was cruelty even the desert wouldn't forgive. He stood, scanning the distance. No wagon lights, no tracks fresh enough to chase. Only the wind, smoothing over the footprints of betrayal. "Can you stand?" he asked. Clara tried, wobbled, and nearly fell. Elias caught her gently. For a moment, the world stood still, an old cowboy holding a fragile girl under the endless night sky. "Easy now," he said. "We'll find you some rest." He lifted her into the saddle, her tiny hands gripping the worn leather horn. She glanced down at him, uncertain. "Where are we going?" "Home," he said simply, swinging up behind her. "My home, till we figure out what the good Lord meant to do with this mess." The horse began to move again, slow and steady. The rhythm of its hooves was like a heartbeat, alive, constant, reassuring. For a while they rode in silence. The prairie stretched wide around them, a sea of silver grass rippling in the wind. Above, the stars hung low and bright. Clara leaned against Elias's chest, listening to the sound of his breath. It was deep, even, like the earth itself had decided to keep her safe for the night. He studied her quietly. The child was light as a bird, her hair tangled and sun-bleached, her clothes torn at the hem. Something in her reminded him of another small soul, one he'd never had the chance to save. When they reached the edge of the valley, the first light of dawn had begun to break, a thin line of gold across the horizon. In that light, Clara's face softened. She was asleep, her fingers still holding the broken pocket watch. Elias slowed his horse, glancing down at it. A watch, cracked glass, the time frozen at 12. He turned it over in his hand, feeling the engraving on the back. "To my little girl. Time can't steal love." He felt something shift in his chest then, an ache that wasn't quite pain. As the ranch fences came into view, the morning air filled with the scent of pine and horses. The sky was painted with the color of beginning again. Elias whispered more to himself than to her. "Looks like you found your trail, little one. And maybe I found mine again." Morning came softly over Silver Creek Ranch. The sun rose behind the ridges, pouring gold through the pine trees until every drop of dew on the rails shone like glass. Roosters crowed, horses nickered in their stalls, and smoke began to climb from the stone chimney of the ranch house. Inside, the world smelled of coffee and warm bread. The fire in the hearth had burned low through the night, leaving only a cradle of orange coals. On a small bed near the window lay Clara May, wrapped in a wool blanket far too big for her. For a long while she didn't move, afraid that if she opened her eyes, the trail and the dust would still be waiting. Then she heard it, the scrape of boots on wood, the deep, careful cough of someone who didn't want to wake her. She opened her eyes. Elias Boone stood near the door, hat in his hands, as if he were facing a creature more delicate than a newborn foal. The morning light carved the lines on his face, softening them into something almost kind. "Good morning, little one," he said quietly. "You slept right through the thunder. Guess you were tired enough to make the sky hush for you." Clara pushed herself upright. The blanket slid to her lap, revealing a nightgown far too large. It must have belonged to someone else once. Her eyes darted to the unfamiliar room, the quilted curtains, the photograph of a woman with a shy smile, the polished spurs hanging by the window. "Where am I?" she whispered. "My ranch," he answered. "Silver Creek. You fainted out there on the trail, so I brought you in. Martha washed you up, found you something to wear." As if her name had been summoned, Martha Lupe appeared from the kitchen doorway, a sturdy woman in her 50s with kind eyes and hair streaked white as frost. She carried a tray, porridge, milk, and a slice of bread shining with honey. "Morning, sweetheart," Martha said, setting it on the bedside table. "Eat slow now. Your stomach'll argue with you if you rush it." Clara looked from the woman to Elias, uncertain whether she should speak or stay silent. She lifted the spoon, tasted once, and then, realizing she wasn't being scolded, began to eat in quick, shy bites. Elias turned to Martha. "Send word to Doc Harris when you can. She might have taken in more sun than's good for her." Martha nodded, lowering her voice. "And the town? They'll start whispering soon." "They already do," he muttered, pushing the hat back onto his head. "Let 'em. A child's not gossip. She's a life." Clara looked up at that, milk on her lip. The man's voice was rough but steady, and something inside her, something that had been locked tight since the wagon rolled away, shifted a little. "Thank you," she said softly. Elias paused at the door. "Don't thank me yet, Missy. You just rest. We'll figure the rest when you're strong." Then he stepped out into the yard, boots crunching on gravel. Through the window, she watched him cross the paddock, sunlight flashing on the buckle of his belt. He moved like a man who carried both weight and purpose. The ranch dogs followed at his heels. Beyond him, hills rolled away toward the horizon, green now under the morning light, not the dead gold of the trail. Martha sat beside the bed, wiping her hands on her apron. "He ain't much for talk," she said with a smile. "But his heart's good, better than most folks around here." Clara traced the rim of the empty bowl. "Does he live alone?" "Just him and the ranch hands. Used to be a wife, too." Martha's smile faltered. "But she and their baby passed near 10 years ago. Since then, he mostly keeps company with his horses." Clara folded her hands, feeling a pang of understanding she couldn't name. "Maybe he misses them." "Every sunrise," Martha said. "That's why the Lord might have sent you this way." The girl said nothing, but her gaze lingered on the window where Elias had vanished toward the stables. Outside, a wind stirred the grass and carried the scent of hay through the open door. For the first time since she'd been left on the trail, the air didn't taste like fear. By noon, the air over Silver Creek shimmered with heat. Clara had wandered as far as the porch, her small frame lost inside a faded dress that Martha had sewn tighter at the waist. From where she stood, she could see the men in the lower field, their shouts and laughter carried on the wind. Each time Elias's voice rose above the others, deep, steady, something in her chest relaxed. He moved differently when he worked, sure, measured, like every motion had a reason. Once he caught her watching, and for the briefest second a smile threatened the corner of his mouth before he turned back to the fence post. She didn't realize she was smiling too. Inside, Martha kneaded dough on the counter. "Town'll know by sundown," she said without looking up. "Jonas rode in for supplies this morning. He'll talk." Elias grunted, wiping sweat from his neck with a rag. "Let him. They've needed something new to wag their tongues about." "Still," Martha said, "you know how they are. Folks'll say you've gone soft, taken in a child that ain't yours." He leaned against the doorframe, staring out toward the porch where Clara sat tracing circles in the dust with her toe. "If that's soft, then maybe I've been hard too long." By late afternoon, clouds began gathering over the ridges, purple and heavy. Elias hitched his horse, tightening the cinch. "I'm riding into town. Need to square things with the doc and maybe head off the talk before it grows horns. Martha wiped her hands. You want me to keep the girl inside? He shook his head. Let her breathe. She's had enough walls. When he rode out, Clara followed him to the gate. Will you come back? She asked, her voice almost lost to the rising wind. He looked down at her, surprised. Of course. A cowboy's got to eat supper somewhere. She nodded, clutching the gatepost as the horse started forward. Dust lifted around them, and for a moment the sight of him against the gray sky looked like something out of a story she'd once been told but never believed. In town, eyes followed him the moment he dismounted in front of the general store. Women paused on the boardwalk, whispering behind their fans. Men tipped their hats, but looked past him too quickly. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking, Ma, is it true Mr. Boone's got a kid now? Elias ignored the stares, walking straight to Doc Harris's office. The old doctor squinted at him over his spectacles. Heard you picked up a stray, he said. She's no stray, Elias answered. Just a child left where no one should be left. Doc's expression softened. You still got that room your wife used to keep her sewing in? Put the girl there. I'll come out tomorrow, make sure she's sound. When Elias stepped back onto the street, the first drops of rain began to fall, scattering dust into tiny dark spots. He pulled his hat low and rode home through the storm. Each mile felt heavier, not because of the rain, but because of what waited inside him, memories of another child that never had a chance to grow. By evening, the storm had passed. The world smelled of wet earth and pine. Lamps glowed through the ranch house windows. Clara sat on the porch steps, her knees tucked under her chin, watching the road. When the shape of the horse appeared against the fading light, her face lit up as if someone had placed a lantern inside her. Elias swung down, boots splashing in puddles. Still awake? I wanted to see if you'd come back, she said. He tied the reins, walked up the steps, and paused beside her. Reckon I will, as long as you keep that promise to eat Martha's cooking. Woman makes biscuits worth staying for. Clara laughed, a small, surprised sound that startled even her. He looked down at her, and for the first time the line between pity and care blurred. The clouds broke apart, and a slice of moonlight spilled over the yard. Somewhere an owl called, lonely and content all at once. Elias sat on the top step, hat resting on his knee, and together they watched the stars blink awake above the ridge. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the last man left in the world. And for the first time in her short life, Clara didn't feel invisible. The ride to the ranch took nearly an hour, but to Lily, it felt like a dream she didn't want to wake from. Every hoofbeat of Ben's horse seemed to carry her farther from fear and closer to something she'd almost forgotten: hope. As they rode through the rolling Wyoming hills, the sky turned a deeper blue, streaked with orange light. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant rain. For the first time in days, Lily wasn't cold. Wrapped in Ben's coat, she could hear his steady heartbeat behind her, strong and calm. Nearly there, Ben said softly, guiding the horse down a trail that opened into a wide valley. And then she saw it, his ranch. A long wooden fence stretched out across golden fields where cattle grazed peacefully. Smoke curled from the chimney of a large log house on the hill, warm light spilling from its windows. It looked nothing like the cold, angry home she'd left behind. This one looked alive, like the kind of place where laughter might actually live. Lily's eyes widened. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ben smiled. "Ain't much compared to them fancy city houses, but it's honest. Everything here's built with hard work and a bit of stubbornness." When they reached the porch, a short, round woman with gray hair hurried out, wiping her hands on her apron. "Benjamin Hart, what have you dragged home this time?" she exclaimed, though there was a smile behind her scolding tone. Ben dismounted and helped Lily down gently. Mrs. May, this is Lily. She needs a warm meal and a place to rest. The housekeeper's sharp eyes softened instantly when she saw the girl's pale face and trembling hands. "Oh, the poor child," she murmured, taking Lily by the shoulders. "Come in, sweetheart. Let's get you fed before you disappear into thin air." Lily hesitated at the doorway, her bare feet hovering above the step. I don't want to be any trouble," she said. Mrs. May smiled kindly. "You let me worry about trouble. You just come inside." The warmth hit Lily like sunlight. The air smelled of stew and fresh bread, the crackle of fire filling the silence. Every corner of the room glowed with life. Handmade quilts on the chairs, shelves lined with books, and tiny wooden horses carved by hand. It was the kind of place she had imagined in her dreams when nights with her stepmother got too long. Mrs. May set a bowl of stew in front of her, thick and steaming. "Eat, dear," she said, "and don't you dare stop until you're full." Lily obeyed. The first spoonful nearly made her cry. It was warm, rich, and real. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd tasted kindness. Ben sat across from her, his hat on the table, watching quietly. "You've been through a lot, haven't you, Lily?" he asked gently. She nodded, keeping her eyes on the bowl. "My stepmother, she said I was a burden. She left me by the road when my father died." Ben's jaw tightened. "That woman doesn't deserve to call herself family," he muttered. Mrs. May shook her head. "The world's full of cruel people, Ben, but it's full of good ones, too. And this little one just found 2 of them. Lily looked up, her eyes wide. "You mean, I can stay?" Ben hesitated. "For a while, at least," he said. "Till we figure things out. You'll be safe here. That's a promise." Mrs. May nodded firmly. "And a promise from Benjamin Hart is worth more than gold." That night, Lily slept in a small upstairs room that smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. The bed was soft, the quilt handmade and heavy enough to make her feel safe. But even as her body relaxed, her mind wandered back to the road, to the sound of the wagon wheels fading away, to her stepmother's cold voice. She woke with tears on her cheeks and found Mrs. May sitting at the foot of her bed, humming softly. "Bad dreams?" she asked. Lily nodded. "Don't worry, child," Mrs. May said, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Dreams can't hurt you here." The next morning, sunlight poured through the window, painting golden patterns on the floor. Lily blinked at the sight of a dress laid neatly over a chair, a simple cotton one, faded but clean. Downstairs, Ben was already working. Through the window, Lily saw him lifting hay bales, calling out to his ranch hands. He looked strong, capable, the kind of man who seemed carved from the same wood as the house itself. But there was something gentle, too. The way he patted the horses, the way he listened when the stable boy spoke. He carried sorrow in his eyes, the kind Lily recognized because she'd seen it in her own reflection. When he came in for breakfast, Lily was waiting at the table, her hair neatly braided. "Good morning, Mr. Hart," she said shyly. "Morning, miss," Ben said with a grin. "Sleep well?" "Yes, sir," she said, then hesitated. "Thank you for rescuing me." He waved a hand. "Wasn't rescuing. Just helping someone who needed it." Mrs. May snorted. "Call it what it is, Ben. You've got a hero complex as big as this ranch." Ben chuckled, but his gaze softened when he looked at Lily. "You can help around here if you want," he said. "Feed the chickens, help Mrs. May in the kitchen, that sort of thing. No hard work, mind you." Lily's eyes lit up. "I can do that. I'm good at working. Stepmother said I had to earn my keep." Mrs. May frowned. "Well, she was half right. Work's good for the soul, but around here, no one earns their keep by fear. You work because you belong." That word, belong, echoed in Lily's chest like a melody she'd forgotten. Belong. No one had ever said that to her before. Over the next few days, Lily learned the rhythm of ranch life. She fed chickens in the morning, helped polish saddles in the barn, and listened as Ben told her stories about the land. Sometimes he'd take her riding, letting her sit in front of him on his horse, showing her how to hold the reins. "You're a natural," he said one afternoon, as they trotted through the pasture. "A few more rides and you'll be teaching me." Lily laughed, the sound light and free. It startled her. She hadn't heard herself laugh like that in years. But behind her laughter, Ben saw something else, a girl still haunted by ghosts she wouldn't talk about. Every night she checked the window before sleeping, as if expecting someone to come take her away. Sometimes she woke up crying quietly, thinking no one heard. Ben did. He'd stand outside her door, listening, hands clenched. He didn't know what kind of woman could abandon a child like that, but he vowed, right then, that Lily would never know that kind of fear again. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled across the valley, Ben found Lily sitting on the porch, hugging her knees. Her doll, a small, ragged thing missing one button eye, rested in her lap. "Can't sleep?" he asked, sitting beside her. She shook her head. "The thunder sounds like wagon wheels. Makes me think she's coming back." Ben's chest tightened. "She's not coming back, Lily. And if she ever tried, she'd have to get through me first." Lily looked up at him, her small face lit by the lightning flash. "Why are you so kind to me?" He hesitated. "Because someone once was kind to me when I didn't deserve it, and I never forgot." Lily nodded slowly, then whispered, "You're like the father I wish I had." Ben's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her that she wasn't alone anymore, that maybe fate had brought them together for a reason. But all he said was, "You better get to bed before Mrs. May scolds us both." As Lily went inside, Ben sat on the porch long after the storm passed, staring out into the dark. Somewhere deep down, he realized something had changed. The ranch didn't feel so empty anymore. The house on the hill, for the first time in years, felt like a home again. The days slipped quietly into summer, and Silver Creek bloomed under the sun. The grass grew tall and soft, brushing against the fences. The air smelled of sage and warm hay, and laughter had found its way back into the house on the hill. Lily had changed. Her face was no longer pale and hollow, but full of light and color. She'd grown stronger, too. She could saddle her own pony now, sweep the barn floor faster than Ben could, and still have energy left to race Mrs. May's old hound through the fields. Ben often caught himself watching her with quiet wonder. There was something healing about her laughter, something that reached into the parts of him he thought were too far gone. Sometimes, when she smiled, he almost saw the daughter he'd once dreamed of having, before loss had turned him into stone. One bright morning, Lily chased the chickens out of the garden, barefoot and giggling. Mrs. May leaned on the porch rail, shaking her head. "That child's got the spirit of a summer storm," she said. Ben smiled. "Yeah, and about as easy to catch." "Town's running low on feed and nails," Mrs. May said. "Might be time you went in for supplies." He nodded, glancing at Lily. "You keep her out of trouble while I'm gone." Mrs. May smirked. "Trouble follows her like a shadow, Ben. I just try to make sure it don't bite." The road to town was quiet that morning. The sky stretched endless and blue, the kind that made a man think about the past whether he wanted to or not. By the time Ben reached the general store, the place was alive with talk. Ranch hands, farmers, and townsfolk gathered on the porch, trading news and gossip like they always did. He hitched his horse and climbed the steps, but as he reached for the door, a voice caught his ear. "Said she was looking for a little girl. 9, maybe 10 years old. Said the rancher took her off the trail near Willow Creek." Ben froze. Inside, the voices continued. Wasn't that the same week Boone found that orphan? What was her name? Lily? Another man replied, Ain't right if you ask me. A man like him taking in a stray girl, folks'll start talking. Ben's hand tightened around the doorframe. The men's words rolled over him like dry dust in the wind. He stepped inside. The talking stopped. Even the shopkeeper, a nervous man named Tom Riley, swallowed hard. Morning, Ben, he said, his voice shaky. Didn't see you there. Ben walked slowly to the counter. Who's asking about the girl? Tom hesitated. A lady came through yesterday. Said her name was Mrs. Alden. Ben's jaw clenched. Describe her. Tom rubbed his chin. Well-dressed, pretty but sharp-eyed, not the kind that says please twice. Ben felt a cold weight settle in his gut. She found us. She say where she was headed? He asked. North Road, Tom said. Asked if Silver Creek was still run by that cowboy with the bad luck and too much pride. A few of the men chuckled under their breath. Ben ignored them. He dropped a few coins on the counter, grabbed his supplies, and walked out without another word. As he saddled his horse, the whispers followed him out onto the street like shadows. Maybe he really did take that girl. Wouldn't put it past him, after what happened to his wife. Ben swung onto his horse and rode hard for home, the wind tearing at his hat brim. By the time he reached the ranch, the sun had started to sink behind the hills. Lily ran out to meet him, her face bright. You're back early, she said, running beside the horse. Did you get the molasses Mrs. May wanted? Ben slid off, his boots hitting the dirt. He managed a small smile. Got it, yeah. Go help her unload the wagon, all right? Lily nodded and ran off, humming a tune. Ben watched her go, his smile fading. He stood there for a long while, staring at the horizon where the road curved out of sight. Somewhere beyond those hills, a woman with a cruel smile and a cold heart was looking for the child who'd finally begun to heal. And Ben knew, if she found her way to Silver Creek, she'd bring a storm bigger than any the ranch had ever seen. The next day dawned gray and heavy, the kind of sky that warned of trouble before it arrived. A restless wind moved through the valley, bending the tall grass and rattling the barn doors. Ben had barely slept. He'd spent most of the night by the window, his rifle resting against the wall, his thoughts circling the same question. What does she want now? By mid-morning, the answer came. A wagon rolled up the road from the south, the wheels kicking up dust. The sound made the horses stir uneasily in the stables. From the porch, Lily froze, her hand tightening around the broom handle she'd been using. Mrs. May stepped beside her, squinting. That ain't a peddler, she said. Who'd come this far dressed in velvet? Ben walked out of the barn, his jaw set. He didn't need a second glance to know who it was. The woman sitting tall in the wagon seat wore a traveling coat too fine for this country, her hair pinned tight beneath a feathered hat. Even at a distance, she radiated something sharp, like polished glass in the sun. She pulled the horse to a stop and stepped down carefully, brushing dust from her gloves. Well, she said, her voice smooth as honey and cold as a blade. So this is the famous Silver Creek Ranch. Lily's breath hitched. Her small voice trembled. Stepmother. Mrs. Alden's painted smile widened. There you are, dear. My, how you've grown. You look almost healthy. Ben moved between them, his stance calm but solid. You've got no business here, Mrs. Alden. She tilted her head. I believe I do. That girl belongs to me. No, Ben said quietly. You left her on a trail to die. Her eyes flashed. I was desperate. My husband had just died and I was alone. I thought someone kind would find her. Someone did, Ben said, and she's staying found. Mrs. Alden's tone hardened. The law doesn't see it that way. I spoke to the sheriff. He's a reasonable man. He said if I can prove guardianship— Guardianship, Mrs. May interrupted, stepping forward, her apron flapping in the wind. You gave up that right the moment you drove away. Mrs. Alden's eyes swept over her with disdain. I'm speaking to the man of the house. Lily took a step forward then, her small hands shaking but her chin lifted. You don't get to talk like that, she said softly. Her stepmother turned, momentarily caught off guard. What did you say? Lily swallowed. You don't get to call me yours. You said I was a burden. You said— Her voice cracked. You said the world would be better if I disappeared. The wind fell still. Even the birds went quiet. Mrs. Alden's painted smile faltered for the first time. You were a difficult child. I did what I thought was best. Ben's voice cut through the silence, low and steady. What's best is she's safe now. You want to take that away from her again, you'll have to go through me. Mrs. Alden's expression hardened. You think you can hide behind sentiment, Mr. Boone? The law will see the truth. But just then, the sound of hooves echoed down the road. A rider approached, the sheriff, coat flapping behind him. He slowed as he neared the gate. Morning, Ben, the sheriff said, tipping his hat. Got word there was a dispute about a child. Mrs. Alden lifted her chin. That's right. That man kidnapped my stepdaughter. The sheriff's eyes moved from her to Ben, then to Lily. The girl stood beside Mrs. May, trembling but defiant. Kidnapped, huh? The sheriff said slowly. Funny. That ain't what I heard. Folks in town say he saved her. She was mine to care for, Mrs. Alden snapped. The sheriff sighed. Lady, I looked into your story. The papers you showed me don't hold. Husband's estate went to debt, not you. You don't have claim to the girl or her name. Mrs. Alden's face turned white. You can't— I can, the sheriff said. And I will. Best you ride on, ma'am, before I decide to charge you for neglect. For a long moment, Mrs. Alden stood frozen, her pride battling the truth. Then she turned, eyes cold as steel, and climbed back into her wagon. As she snapped the reins, she looked down at Lily one last time. You'll regret this, she hissed. But Lily didn't flinch. She stood tall, her little hands balled into fists. No, she said quietly. I already did. I just stopped. The wagon turned and rolled away, the sound of wheels fading down the dirt road until only the wind remained. Ben exhaled slowly, the tension leaving his shoulders. The sheriff tipped his hat again. You did right, Ben. World's better with that little one here. When the sheriff rode off, Mrs. May let out a long breath. Well, she said, that was a storm and a half. Ben looked down at Lily. She was staring at the road, her face unreadable. Then she turned to him, eyes shining with tears she wasn't afraid to show. She's gone? She whispered. She's gone, Ben said, and she ain't coming back. Lily nodded. Then, without a word, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. For a second, Ben froze. Then he knelt and held her tight. The world seemed to exhale around them. The wind softened, the ranch dogs barked somewhere near the barn, and the sun broke through the clouds, spilling light across the porch. Mrs. May wiped her eyes discreetly with her apron. Looks like this house finally found its heart again, she murmured. That night, as the stars burned bright over the ridge, Lily sat on the porch steps, her head resting against Ben's arm. You think the sky remembers people? She asked softly. Maybe, Ben said. Maybe it keeps the good ones close. She smiled. Then Mama's up there somewhere. He nodded. I reckon she's proud of you tonight. Lily looked out at the horizon, the same road where she'd once been left behind. Now it led only to home, and for the first time, she believed she'd never have to walk it alone again. The days after the storm felt like the world had been washed clean. The hills around Silver Creek glowed green again, wildflowers pushing through the soil like small bursts of forgiveness. The house on the hill stood steady against the morning light, smoke curling from its chimney in a lazy spiral. Inside, laughter had returned, soft, real, and ordinary in the best way. Lily was kneeling by the fireplace, coaxing the flames to life under Mrs. May's watchful eye. "Not too much kindling," the old woman warned. "You'll smother it." Lily smiled. "Like when you talk too much while baking?" Mrs. May froze, then burst out laughing. "You're getting bold, little one." Ben, sitting at the table with a mug of coffee, looked up from a stack of papers. "Don't encourage her, May. She'll have this whole house running on her jokes by winter." "Better than running on your silence," Mrs. May muttered, but her eyes twinkled. Lily giggled, and for the first time since she'd come to Silver Creek, her laughter sounded effortless, like it belonged there. That afternoon, Ben saddled the wagon. "We're heading to town," he told Lily. "Got a few papers need signing." "What kind of papers?" she asked, climbing up beside him. He adjusted his hat. "The kind that make things official." The road to town seemed different now. Not so long, not so empty. The wind smelled of dust and wild clover, and the creak of the wagon wheels was almost musical. Lily held the edge of her seat with both hands, smiling as the ranch faded behind them. When they reached the courthouse, Ben lifted her down carefully. "Now remember," he said, trying to sound serious, "no running around or touching fancy things." She nodded solemnly, then immediately whispered, "Can I touch the pen?" He chuckled. "We'll see." Inside, the old clerk looked up from his desk. "Well, I'll be," he said. "Benjamin Hart in town before noon. What brings you here?" "Paperwork," Ben said simply. "Adoption papers." The man blinked, then smiled slowly. "You finally doing it, huh?" Ben nodded. "It's time." He glanced at Lily, who was standing straight, her hands clasped tightly behind her back, eyes wide as if she were in a cathedral. The clerk pushed the papers across the desk. "You sign here, Mr. Hart. Then she signs, if she wants to." Lily's breath caught. "I get to sign too?" Ben nodded. "Reckon so. You're part of this, aren't you?" She stepped forward, her small fingers trembling as she took the pen. She wrote her name slowly, each letter careful and unsure. Lily Hart. When she looked up, Ben was smiling. Not the guarded, polite smile he'd worn for months, but something soft and proud. "Looks right," he said. The clerk stamped the paper. "Congratulations," he said. "You're a family now." The ride home was quiet. The wind whistled through the grass, and Lily rested her head on Ben's arm. "Does this mean I don't have to go anywhere else?" she asked softly. Ben looked down at her, his throat tight. "No, sweetheart. This is your home now. Always." She smiled, eyes half closed. "Then I'm going to plant a tree here, so I never forget where I belong." Weeks passed, and Silver Creek settled into a gentle rhythm. Lily woke early to feed the chickens, her hair tied back with a ribbon Mrs. May had sewn from an old curtain. Ben worked the fields, his steps lighter than they'd been in years. Some evenings they'd sit together on the porch, the sun melting behind the hills. Ben would carve little wooden animals for Lily, and she'd paint them with leftover barn paint, crooked, colorful, and full of life. "You know," Mrs. May said one evening, watching from the doorway, "this place used to echo like an empty well. Now it hums." Ben smiled faintly. "Guess it just needed a bit of laughter." Mrs. May nodded. "And a reason to come home." One night, Lily couldn't sleep. She padded quietly down the hall to Ben's study, where he sat by the fire reading. "Mr. Hart?" she whispered. He looked up. "Something wrong?" She shook her head. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For finding me. For not giving up." Ben put down his book. "You don't thank family, Lily. You just love 'em back." She smiled sleepily. "Then I love you back." He felt something stir deep inside him, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. He reached out and brushed her hair from her forehead. "Go on now. Bedtime." She nodded and turned to go, but halfway down the hall, she looked back. "Good night, Pa." Ben froze. The word hung in the air like a prayer answered. He smiled softly. "Good night, darling." Outside, the moon rose high over Silver Creek, casting a silver glow across the ranch. The fences stood firm, the fields whispered with wind, and the house on the hill, once empty, once haunted, breathed with life again. Inside, a little girl slept safe for the first time in her life, and a man who'd thought he'd lost everything finally understood what it meant to be whole. The promise of the heart had been kept, not by paper or law, but by love. Autumn slipped quietly into winter at Silver Creek. The hills that once shimmered gold were now veiled in frost, and the creek itself sang in a softer, slower voice beneath thin sheets of ice. Smoke curled constantly from the ranch chimney, the smell of oak wood and stew filling every room. Life had found its rhythm, even under the bite of winter. Lily had grown taller, her cheeks rosy and her laughter stronger. She helped Mrs. May gather kindling, hung herbs to dry by the window, and learned to stitch torn gloves while Ben worked to keep the cattle warm in the barn. But the season, as beautiful as it was, carried its own tests. One morning, Ben woke before dawn to the sound of wind moaning against the shutters. The sky outside was a blank sheet of gray. Snow was coming, the kind that buried fences and swallowed roads. He pulled on his coat and went out to the barn, his breath forming clouds in the air. The horses shifted nervously, hooves clattering on the floor. Mrs. May appeared behind him, her scarf pulled tight. "Storm's brewing, Ben. Best tie down the feed shed before it takes flight." He nodded. "You keep Lily inside. Don't let her near the barns till it passes." Mrs. May smirked. "That child's got more curiosity than sense, but I'll do my best." By midday, the snow came hard, thick and relentless. The wind howled through the valley, rattling every window. The world outside vanished in white. Inside, Lily pressed her face to the glass, eyes wide. "It looks like the clouds fell down," she whispered. Ben smiled faintly as he set more wood in the fire. "That's one way to put it." "Will the animals be okay?" she asked. "They will," he said, though worry tugged at the back of his mind. Mrs. May shot him a look. She knew that tone too well. That night, while the storm screamed outside, Lily sat cross-legged by the fire, humming softly. She'd taken one of Ben's old flannels and stitched a crooked heart onto the pocket. When he noticed, she held it up shyly. "For you," she said. "So you remember you're not alone." Ben stared at it, the small red heart trembling in her hands. He swallowed hard. "Thank you, sweetheart." He took it, running a rough thumb over the stitches. "You've got steady hands." "I just want to help," she said. "You help everyone all the time. Someone should help you, too." Ben didn't know what to say. So he did what felt right. He pulled her close, holding her as the wind battered the walls. Days passed. The storm didn't let up. Food ran low. The firewood stack shrank faster than Ben liked. Then, one morning, Lily woke coughing, a deep rattling sound that froze Ben's blood. Mrs. May frowned. "Cold's turned on her lungs," she said quietly. We'll need medicine. Ben's jaw tightened. The town doctor's a half-day's ride in this weather. Mrs. May met his eyes. Then you best ride fast. Ben saddled his horse before sunrise. The snow was waist-deep, the wind sharp as glass. He wrapped himself in his thickest coat and tucked a small locket Lily had given him into his pocket. For luck, she'd said. As he rode into the blizzard, the world disappeared behind him. Only the faint outline of the ranch lights flickered in the distance, growing smaller and smaller until they were gone. Every mile felt like a battle. The cold bit through his gloves, his horse stumbled more than once, and the road to town was buried. But every time he thought of turning back, he saw Lily's face. Pale, smiling through fever, whispering, "You'll come back, won't you?" And he pushed on. Hours later, he reached town, half frozen but alive. He pounded on the doctor's door. "Ben Hart," the doctor gasped, pulling him in. "You look like death warmed over. What in God's name are you doing out in this weather?" "My girl," Ben said, voice hoarse. "She's sick. I need the medicine." The doctor didn't ask questions. He packed what Ben needed, syrup, herbs, and a small vial of clear liquid. "For fever," he said. "Careful with the dose." Ben paid him what he had, nodded, and turned back into the storm. Night had already fallen by the time he saw the light of Silver Creek through the snow. His horse stumbled to a stop in front of the gate, steam rising from its flanks. Mrs. May threw open the door. "Thank the Lord," she cried. "I thought you'd frozen out there." Ben staggered inside, his face raw from the cold. He went straight to Lily's bedside. She was pale, eyes half closed, but she smiled weakly when she saw him. "You came back," she whispered. "Didn't I promise?" he said, voice breaking. He gave her the medicine, waited by her side all night, feeding the fire every hour. At dawn, the fever finally broke. Lily stirred, blinking at the light. "It's morning," she said softly. Ben leaned forward, exhaustion heavy in his eyes. "Yeah. You just rest, sweetheart. We made it." She smiled faintly. "I told you. The clouds just fell down. They didn't mean harm." Ben laughed through tears. "You always find a way to make the world gentle, don't you?" By the time the snow melted, Silver Creek was alive again. The fences stood, the animals grazed, and the sound of laughter returned to the house. Mrs. May watched them one evening as Lily helped Ben fix the barn door. "You ever notice," she said, "that the worst storms make the roots grow deeper?" Ben nodded, eyes soft. "Yeah, and the heart stronger." The sky stretched clear and blue, and for the first time in his life, Ben realized family wasn't something you found. It was something you held on to, no matter how cold the world became. Winter loosened its grip on Silver Creek like an old man releasing a sigh. The snow melted slowly, revealing dark, rich soil beneath. Streams began to murmur again, and birds returned to the fences, calling out as if to say, "We're home." The ranch woke with them. The barn doors creaked open to sunlight, the horses stamped in their stalls, and Lily, her hair now a little longer, her face full of color, ran barefoot through the thawing grass. She laughed as the cold mud squished between her toes. "It's alive again!" she shouted. Mrs. May smiled from the porch. "Child, you've been cooped up too long." Ben, mending a fence nearby, shook his head. "She's got spring fever, that's what." Lily spun in a slow circle, arms wide. "No, Pa, I've got spring hope." Life fell into a new kind of peace. The world seemed lighter, kinder somehow, but Lily's mind was busy with something she hadn't told anyone, something she'd been planning since the day she'd gotten sick. It started with a small patch of earth near the creek. One morning, Ben found her there, kneeling in the mud with a little spade and a pouch of seeds. "What are you up to, Miss Secret Keeper?" he asked. She looked up, smiling. "Remember what I said about planting a tree, so I never forget where I belong?" Ben's brow softened. "I remember." "Well," she said, carefully pressing a seed into the soil, "I decided one tree wasn't enough. I want to plant many, for every kid who doesn't have a home yet." Ben crouched beside her, silent for a long moment. The creek whispered beside them. "That's a mighty big dream, Lily." She looked at him, eyes clear and certain. "Then it'll need mighty big love." Word spread through the valley like wildfire. Folks from town came riding up one by one, people who had once whispered about Ben and the orphan girl he'd taken in. They came carrying shovels, jars of seeds, even saplings wrapped in burlap. "What's all this?" Ben asked the first family that arrived. A man cleared his throat. "Heard the little ones plantin' a grove. Figured we'd help." Mrs. May grinned. "Seems your good heart's contagious, Ben Hart." Ben looked toward Lily, who was already giving orders like a foreman. "That one goes by the fence line. Oh, and this one's for Mr. Riley's wife. She likes apple trees." The whole ranch came alive with work and laughter. By evening, the field by the creek had transformed into a patchwork of young trees, each marked with a name scratched into a wooden tag. Some names were of children from town, others of folks who had no one left to remember them. When it was done, Lily stood in the middle of it all, her hair golden in the setting sun. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ben nodded, his voice thick. "So are you." Weeks passed and spring took full hold. The trees began to sprout tiny leaves. Every morning, Lily visited the grove, watering each one with care. Sometimes she talked to them softly, telling them stories about the people they were planted for. One afternoon, a woman rode up the trail, dusty, tired, and nervous. She stopped at the gate, watching the ranch. Ben saw her from the porch. It was Mrs. Alden, Lily's stepmother. For a long time, neither spoke. Then she said quietly, "I heard what the girl's done. Folks talk about her everywhere. They say she's kind." Ben nodded slowly. "She is." The woman's voice broke. "I wasn't. I thought if I left her, I'd forget my mistakes. But I never did." Ben looked toward the grove. "She doesn't talk about the past much. She talks about the future." Mrs. Alden hesitated, tears in her eyes. Could I see her? Just once?" Ben thought for a moment, then nodded. Lily was by the creek, singing softly to the young trees. When she saw the woman approach, she froze. Her little hands trembled. Ben stood back, letting her decide. The woman knelt in the grass. "Lily, I don't expect forgiveness. I just came to say I'm sorry. You didn't deserve what I did." Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up a small seed from her pocket and held it out. "This one's for you," she said softly. "If you plant it, it'll grow, just like I did." The woman's tears fell freely. "You'd give me that? After everything?" Lily nodded. "Because someone once found me when I was lost. Maybe this seed will help you find your way too." When the woman rode away, the air felt lighter. Ben came to stand beside Lily. "That was mighty brave." She smiled faintly. "You said family means holding on, but sometimes it means letting go too." Ben looked down at her, pride shining in his eyes. "You're wiser than anyone I know, Lily Hart." That night, as the sun slipped behind the hills, the new grove shimmered in gold light. The wind moved through the young trees like a hymn, and for a moment Silver Creek seemed to hum with something larger than life, a kind of peace that only comes from love freely given. Mrs. May rocked slowly on the porch, watching them. "Well," she said with a satisfied sigh, Looks like she went and planted hope itself. Ben smiled. Yeah, and I reckon it's gonna grow. He lifted Lily onto his shoulders, and together they watched the sky turn to fire and then to stars. The world had taken so much from them once, but now it gave back in ways words could barely hold. And there, under the endless Texas sky, the orphan girl and the cowboy with a golden heart finally found what they'd both been searching for all along. Not just family, but forever.